Turn 10 old guys loose on a road trip, driving up the Atlantic coast of Florida, and no telling what they'll see. We call ourselves Los Amigos, and we've been taking annual trips together for a number of years. It's the first day of December 2025, and our meeting place is the massive Miami airport. We were coming from different cities, so we arrived in different terminals at different times. It took me more than half an hour of walking through disjointed concourses and taking a rooftop train to find my fellow amigos. But it was worth it. Starting in Miami, we took an airboat tour in the nearby Everglades, then did some ocean fishing the next day. In Fort Pierce, we visited the U.S. Navy SEAL Museum. On Cape Canaveral, we had a private tour of the Kennedy Space Center. Our next stop was Daytona Beach, home of the Daytona International Speedway. In Saint Augustine, we explored the fortifications of Castillo de San Marcos. And in Savannah, we took a port tour that gave us a close-up view of the container shipping industry. From there, we flew home. Old men like to talk, and our Miami Verbo was great for that. But we needed to be a family with kids, maybe even grandkids, to take full advantage of everything we found in our backyard. Take a look around. One of the reasons we came to Miami was to experience the Cuban-American culture, so we wasted no time seeking it out. Versailles, pronounced Versalles in Spanish, had been recommended to us as a great Cuban restaurant. But wait, what's with the bakery? Well, it turns out that from the parking lot we could enter the restaurant from the bakery, and that's a good thing, because out front something was going on. It appeared to be a demonstration. We had to see what it was all about, so we stopped to listen, as if we could understand every word the speaker was saying. We were told the crowd was concerned about a couple of political prisoners. Well, that was not something we knew anything about, so we went on into the restaurant. Versalles was obviously a popular place, and the backlighted mirrors gave it a stunning decor. We all managed to fit around one long table, and can report that the recommendation we had been given was a good one. It's a short drive from Miami to Everglades National Park, and we were looking forward to exploring it aboard a fan boat. But first, our guide wanted us to meet an albino Burmese python, one of the top 2 predators in the Everglades.
These female pythons, they usually mate every year, and they'll usually lay around 100 eggs, and they're super fertile. So even if you kill a bunch of them, they just come back every season. It's very, very difficult. So these pythons have really taken up residence here and destroyed a lot of our wildlife. They've actually taken out about 90% of our mammal population and about 60% of our birds.
Wow. The more familiar top predator in the Everglades is the alligator. Not too fearsome yet, but just wait. It likes to snack mostly on turtles, fishes, birds, snakes, and frogs. But mammals like bert aren't off the menu. Deer and even other alligators are fair game. With that introduction to the apex predators of the Everglades, the Native American alligator, and the invasive Burmese python, we climb aboard our flat-bottomed, fan-driven boat. We set out on what appears to be an established roadway, pushing aside water lilies and tropical grasses that think they can impede us. Our guide sits high above us on a perch in front of the giant fan that propels us. Thank goodness we're given ear protection to muffle the noise of an industrial-sized fan that's as loud as an airplane engine. No quiet wildlife observation is possible while we're moving. But our guide kills the engine to explain that we are actually on a slow-moving river.
It is traveling south at about 100 feet per day. so it moves very slowly. The motion you see on the water right now is just from the wind. It's actually kind of blowing us northeast, so the flow is more that way towards that island.
It's hard to believe that the Everglades cover the entire southern tip of Florida with 1.5 million acres of wetlands that are home to mangroves and sawgrass marshes. We're skimming across the largest tropical wilderness in the country, not surprisingly labeled a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Suddenly, our boat slows to a crawl. Bert has seen something. It was a great egret, one of 360 bird species that have been sighted in the Everglades. We finally saw some wildlife. Then we hit the jackpot, an alligator. Not one, but two. At last, we felt fulfilled. Now, as we head back, we've got bragging rights, and we can proudly blaze a new trail through the vegetation for those who follow us. We didn't venture into Miami's colorful Little Havana neighborhood to soak up Cuban culture, puff cigars, or linger over strong coffee. Rather, we had heard about a small museum of interest, the Bay of Pigs Museum, located in a strip mall. Most of us were of high school or college age when, in April 1961, the U.S. sponsored an invasion of Cuba by 1,500 Cuban exiles opposed to Fidel Castro. We were reminded that in just 3 days, Castro's overwhelming forces had defeated the invaders and taken 1,100 prisoners. The negotiated release of the survivors would drag on until 1965. We were told that this tiny storefront museum would be replaced by a much larger modern one within the next year. It's only taken 60 years, but memories don't die in Little Havana. It was a short drive to Miami Beach, where we enjoyed a luxury delicacy at Joe's Stone Crab. Being novice stone crab diners, we eagerly submitted to wearing bibs bearing the logo of this legendary restaurant. While in Miami, we were looking forward to doing some ocean fishing in the harbor. TA had arranged 2 boats, each captained by a knowledgeable fishing guide, to take our party of 10 in search of a fresh fish dinner. We had to succeed, or we'd go hungry. The competition was on. Captain Alex Figg hosted one group of 5 in his boat, the Bear Coast Bandit. Our group was lucky to have not only a seasoned captain, but a delightful first mate. With every catch, she offered helpful cooking and seasoning suggestions, so dinner was definitely in our sights. It was a treat for me just to see a small portion of the Miami skyline glide past, along with a variety of bridges along the way. Before moving far from the shore, each of our boats received a visit from the bait man. I kind of suspected that we'd be contributing more fish into the harbor than we'd be pulling out. Oops, not all the bait ended up in the tank. I couldn't help but admire the luxury condominiums we were passing. Soon the harbor skyline was receding into the horizon, and the water was turning a brilliant shade of blue. With our view of the city completely lost, it was time to start fishing. Here are a few examples to show you what we were catching. First, TA got a little action. Soon he landed a Spanish mackerel. Fierce looking, but considered good eating. Then Bert followed suit. Our guides stood ready to help. It's a yellowtail snapper, a popular game fish valued for its light, flaky, mild-flavored meat, the first one of many we caught. Now TA showed off a brilliant blue parrotfish, considered a protected species here in Florida. It had to be thrown back so it could continue its important work in the coral reef ecosystem. Soon Mayor Steve joined the ranks of successful fishermen with another yellowtail snapper. Well, that's enough of our fish stories. How was the other team doing? We wanted to ask the pelican who had taken command of their bow. The pelican team was a little slower to start reeling them in, but we were at parity by the time we were ready to head back. It had been a very productive day. Dinner was looking assured, with each boat claiming a catch of about 10 to 20 fish. Now the work began, but our skilled guides made quick work of the cleaning task. Better them than us. Clearly there's an art to the process. At the end of the day, TA and Chef Steve handled the cooking responsibilities, and we all dined like kings. We didn't begin to eat all we had caught, but discovered the hard way, after a couple of days, that it would take more than an ice chest to save the leftovers for another meal. Oh well, there was always non-stop conversation, which never became stale. You'd never guessed that the charming little town of Fort Pierce on Florida's Atlantic coast was where the famous frogmen were trained in World War II. Today, these underwater demolition teams, or UDTs as they call them, have expanded their Special Force mission to encompass sea, air, and land, thus giving rise to the name Navy SEALs. Upon entering the National Navy UDT SEAL Museum, we found ourselves looking at a model of the private compound in Pakistan, where the Navy SEALs took out Osama bin Laden early in the morning of May 2nd in the year 2011. This highly publicized operation lives in our memory, but it was just one of many special assignments that Navy SEALs have undertaken against high-value targets, recovering hostages, conducting reconnaissance, destroying infrastructure, and so on. In other words, secret missions using well-rehearsed small teams that require speed, stealth, and precision. As you might imagine, SEAL training takes well over a year, and only the best make it through. 90% drop out. The exhibits covered missions from Grenada and Panama to more recent conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. The cutting-edge technology we saw took many forms. Let's just say these are weapons with special capabilities. Lush dioramas even dropped us into the Mekong Delta region of Vietnam. You never know where you're going to find the Navy SEALs. Outside the museum, a small armada of specialized transport and underwater vehicles awaited us. The largest of these was the Mark V Special Operations craft. It's been used to support operations in the Middle East and throughout the world. This cute little guy is a swimmer delivery vehicle, the Button 5.60, used for covert underwater missions. Now what's this? The Apollo 13 Command Module, which splashed down in the Pacific Ocean in 1970. Who else but UDT divers would have been used to recover astronauts returning from outer space? As was our custom, after dinner, Amigos took turns delivering what we called campfire talks. TA's story was a war story, recounting his time in Vietnam. What are the chances that 10 old men like us would ever get to the moon? Very unlikely. That's why we decided to do the next best thing. Take a small group VIP tour of the Kennedy Space Center on Cape Canaveral. To start with, NASA's Visitor Center is quite extensive, and having a knowledgeable space expert as our personal guide would help. Beyond that, the distance between launch complexes is measured in miles. Having our own dedicated van would allow us to see in one day what would normally take us 2 or more days to visit on a shuttle bus. From the moment we arrived, our attention was drawn to the rocket garden that displayed a collection of launch vehicles used from the beginning of the U.S. space program. One of the largest was the Titan II, which carried 2 astronauts into orbit in the Gemini program. During the Cold War, 54 of them were hidden in underground silos and topped with our most powerful nuclear weapon. On a personal note, my Air Force duty was to command one of those Titan II missile crews. We are nose to nose with the Atlantis, one of several orbiting space shuttles that NASA flew in the 30 years between 1981 and 2011. 135 official missions in all. Initially, the program was focused on science and placing satellites in orbit, but toward the end, U.S. space shuttles helped build the International Space Station. Think of the Atlantis as a giant glider that's hitched to the side of a big orange fuel tank being lifted through the Earth's atmosphere by 2 solid-fueled rockets. After just 2 minutes, the rockets fall back to Earth, and the 3 main engines on the space shuttle take over to guide the spaceship toward its orbit. Fuel flows from the external tank for 6.5 minutes. Then the tank separates, re-enters the atmosphere, and burns up. Smaller motors on the Atlantis take over for final orbital positioning. At that point, the space shuttle begins circling the Earth once every 90 minutes, and it continues doing so, typically for the next 10 to 14 days. To recap, the space shuttle is launched as part of a stack that includes 2 solid-fuel rockets that lift it out of the Earth's atmosphere. After about 2 minutes, the lift rockets fall away and are recovered back on Earth. The large tank remains as a source of liquid fuel for the shuttle's own big engines. Once the shuttle nears its orbit, the fuel tank separates and burns up in the Earth's atmosphere. That leaves the shuttle on its own, with only small maneuvering engines to fine-tune its orbital position. Now it can go to work. Here you see the bay doors open and a satellite being placed into orbit, a typical shuttle assignment. When its assignments are complete, the shuttle returns home through the Earth's atmosphere, now flying strictly as a glider, as it makes a powerless landing. This is the empty shell of the actual Atlantis, which looks here quite large. But it was pretty cramped, with limited headroom on each of several levels, like living in a small RV or van. There had to be room for up to 7 people, a toilet and shower, a galley, a payload bay for experiments or satellites, and an airlock. Oh, and don't forget enough room to store clothes, food, water, and oxygen. This passageway will give you some idea of how limited the space was. After we finished examining the Atlantis space shuttle, we were strapped into a simulator that took us through a launch experience.
Mankind is about to leave his planet behind and journey to another. It is one of those rare moments when history is not being made, destiny is being embraced.
Space shuttles like Atlantis are now history, but the Artemis program to return to the moon is our immediate future. And this building is where the massive vehicles to take us back to the moon are assembled. The VAB, Vehicle Assembly Building, you see here, is 525 feet tall. It's the world's largest single-story building, and it's used for stacking rockets. The massive door was closed, and preparations for Artemis II were underway as we drove by. The SLS space launch system is inside. It's the world's most powerful rocket ever, and it will take 4 astronauts in the Orion spacecraft on a 10-day lunar flyby around the moon in early 2026. If you're wondering how to move a massive rocket to a launch pad, Well, here's the answer. They stack the rocket on a big platform or tray called a mobile launch platform. Then they use a crawler transporter like this one to move the rocket very slowly and carefully to the launch area, where it serves as the actual launch pad. Our tour stopped for a show and tell at the gantry at Launch Complex 39, which was used for both the Space Shuttle and Apollo missions. Today it lets visitors imagine what it's like to stand directly below a giant rocket engine as it's being tested. I said imagine. You won't be burned, deafened, blinded, or shaken by the gentle simulation that's about to begin. On the observation level of this gantry, we found an opportunity for hands-on experience, as we enjoyed a 360-degree view of the launch pads up and down the coast. Here's Launch Complex 39A that NASA has approved for SpaceX to make up to 44 Starship launches and 88 landings per year. As luck would have it, SpaceX was scheduled for a launch the day following our visit. What happens if something goes wrong just before takeoff and the astronauts are already on board? Well, here's an emergency egress system. Our guide told us it's been tested, but not yet used. As you can see, the distances are substantial between launch complexes, and there are a lot of them. We can't even see the ones farther north on the Space Force base. The Apollo Saturn V mission has its own exhibit center, where we found the actual capsule from Apollo 14, looking a bit tarnished from its re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere. The highlight of this building for me was a recreation of the firing room in the Launch Control Center. The panels and equipment you see here are real, but the action simulates what the engineers saw as they monitored all aspects of the launch. Once the rocket was in flight, control would transfer to the Johnson Space Center, we know it as Mission Control, in Houston. Meanwhile, enjoy the dramatic liftoff of the Apollo 8 launch. With that, we wrapped up our visit to NASA's Kennedy Space Center, well grounded in recent space history and ready for the next conquest. Our hearts started pounding as we approached the Daytona International Speedway. For just $194 each, we could ride shotgun on a NASCAR ride-along. Imagine this seasoned group of gentlemen taking 3 high-speed laps with a pro racing instructor behind the wheel. But alas, the track had been closed for a private event, and we had to settle for a museum experience. Our loved ones breathed a sigh of relief. Well, it turns out there was a lot to see. For me, the logical place to start was Daytona Beach, where I recall stock car races were held on the sand throughout my childhood in the 1950s. On the straightaways, top speeds there could reach roughly 120 to 130 miles per hour. Whether we were interested in racing history, the vehicles, the drivers, or the track itself, we found the exhibits absorbing. Here's a sampling. Stock car racing has come a long way from being a beach sport. We wandered into a museum theater that was showing continuous clips of racing highlights. Two members of our group sat down in front so they wouldn't miss the action. The Daytona International Speedway opened in 1959 and is the world-famous home of the Daytona 500, the most prestigious race in NASCAR. Through the years, lights have been added, and the Speedway has been renovated 4 times. Today it hosts not only stock car events, but sports cars, motorcycles, and trucks. It seats anywhere from about 100,000 to 168,000, depending on how the race course is configured. NASCAR stands for National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing. That means the engines must be available in standard production cars. With that limit, best speeds are only about 200 miles an hour on the straightaways and less on turns, although 31-degree banking on oval turns allows top drivers to excel. Here's a dad who's out to excel on a NASCAR driving simulation. I'd say he's doing pretty well. Here comes a curve. Good job, Dad. A happy ending to our visit. We arrived in Saint Augustine, Florida on a drizzly night. But its annual Nights of Lights celebration welcomed us with plenty of sparkle. The country's oldest city was named by National Geographic as having one of the top 10 holiday light displays in the nation. Celebration had begun in November and wouldn't conclude until January. It was raining in earnest the next morning when we arrived at the city's visitor center. But we couldn't let that dampen our spirits. We were about to visit the oldest masonry fort in the continental United States, and certainly Saint Augustine's oldest structure. The Spanish completed Castillo de San Marcos in 1695. The fort continues to stand guard over Saint Augustine's waterfront, located strategically on the western shore of Matanzas Bay. A costumed guide helped us understand that the fort had been under control of 4 different governments through the years: Spain, Great Britain, the United States, and briefly the Confederacy. Now Castillo de San Marcos is ruled by the National Park Service. Let's go inside and look around. The business end of the fort is not found here in the plaza, but up on the next level where cannons guard against attack. Through the years, the fort was attacked several times and besieged twice, but due to its strategic cannon placement and star-shaped design, the fort was never breached or taken by force. The artillery you see here is mostly of Spanish origin. In addition to these full-sized cannons, we found a stubby-looking mortar, which is useful for shooting up and over walls. Below the level of the cannons, we found living quarters, probably for soldiers or even prisoners. Here you see the recreation of a 17th century Spanish officer's room. Back up on the cannon level again. Don't tell the building occupants across the way, but they are in the line of fire. As for our safety, don't worry. We have an alert Cooper's Hawk as our sentry. Saint Augustine, Florida is the nation's oldest city, established by the Spanish in 1565. That's 42 years before Jamestown and 55 years before Plymouth Rock. This section of the city is comparatively up to date, but that's where we found Villa Zorayda, which is doing its best to look like the 12th century Alhambra Palace in Granada, Spain. That's at least 4 centuries older than the city of Saint Augustine itself. Villa Zorayda is an architectural curiosity now, and we just had to take a look inside. This scaled-down replica of the Alhambra was built in 1883 as the winter home of Boston millionaire and globe-trotting collector Franklin W. Smith. Its design influenced the Gilded Age revival of Moorish architecture in Florida. Besides serving as a residence until 1922, the building became a roaring 20s nightclub and gambling casino until Florida outlawed gambling 3 years later. Today, it serves as a unique tourist attraction and museum, displaying an eclectic collection of original art and antiques from all over the world. Brass lamps, oriental rugs, inlaid furniture, pottery, sculptures, and more. Pretend you are attending a cluttered estate sale as you browse through the distinctively designed rooms of Villa Zorayda. There are no price tags, nothing's for sale, but you're welcome to take a look. At last, a quiet place to sit down. Someone, please pour the wine. Savannah, Georgia is famous for its historic district filled with impressive old homes on cobblestone streets. On our Old Town Trolley tour, we were lucky to have a storytelling driver who brought Savannah's colorful history to life. We were equally thrilled to find that, framed by trees dripping with Spanish moss, our lodging would be in an imposing Queen Anne Victorian mansion. Let me show you around. Hardin House was built in 1891 for Judge William Deering Hardin. The house has gone through several owners and renovations over the years. Christmas decorations greeted us as we descended into the spacious entryway, which opened into a high-ceilinged living room. We made ourselves right at home in the adjoining dining room for meals and endless discussions. We had to learn to love stairs, since our sleeping quarters were scattered over 4 floors, if you count the attic. I'd love to know what the neighbors thought as we headed out for sightseeing. Meet Captain Boo Harrell, who gave us a private tour of the Port of Savannah. He was about to take us up the Savannah River to the Georgia Port Authority, letting us get up close and personal with massive container ships along the way. There's nothing like an open-air boat for unobstructed viewing. First, we caught sight of Savannah City Hall with its golden dome. Then we passed a dredger, whose job it is to keep the channel deep enough for container ship navigation. We bundled up to keep warm in the cold December air, while Captain Boo told us war stories.
Roll on. Think of a big parking garage that floats. We exported all the BMW SUVs that are built in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and any military vehicles that were going overseas. Like when the Iraqi, Iran, and Afghan war started, there were thousands of military vehicles here that got put on the ro-ro ships and could be shipped overseas.
Our captain wanted us to appreciate the Port of Savannah's ranking as the 3rd busiest container port in the nation. More than 35 container ships are processed here each week. The port contains more than 50 piers, wharves, and docks, many using cranes like these to load and offload the ships. These large silos have been used to hold a white Georgia clay called kaolin, used as an ingredient in many products. About 70% of Georgia's kaolin is used in paper manufacturing to give the finish the kind of glossy look you see in magazines. Here's a general cargo ship, probably picking up a load of kaolin. Now we're coming to the big boys. Evergreen is a Taiwanese company with more than 150 container ships. This ship, the Evermass, has a capacity of more than 15,000 TEU. TEU stands for 20-foot equivalent unit, the standard unit of capacity for containers that are 20 feet long. Here we had a fleeting chance to observe the loading of a container onto a truck. It's an increasingly automated process. Don't confuse Costco shipping with the retailer. China Ocean Shipping Company, abbreviated COSCO, has a fleet of more than 1,000 vessels. We're heading back now, and we're freezing. I checked the wind chill for that day and found that on the water it had dropped to the upper 20s and lower 30s. Someone needs a nap. Captain Boo wasn't feeling the cold at all. For him, this was normal. We waved goodbye to a nearby tug. Passing under the Talmadge Memorial Bridge tells us that we're back after a most informative tour. We had enjoyed a supermoon as our welcome to Florida. From the Everglades and Miami, we went on to do some ocean fishing, learn about the Navy SEALs, explore the Kennedy Space Center, see the Daytona Speedway, visit Saint Augustine's ancient fort, and take a close-up look at container shipping in Savannah. Along the way, we enjoyed some mighty fine dining, good fellowship, and conversation. It was another successful adventure for Los Amigos.